The story of America used to be simple. If you worked hard, followed the rules, and kept at it, you could build a decent life. A home, a car, a family, maybe even a vacation once in a while. But that promise is under pressure like never before. The middle class, the backbone of this country, is struggling. After World War II, America was on top of the world. Its factories were humming, and the middle class was thriving. Unlike Europe and Asia, whose factories have been devastated by the war, America's industrial base remained largely intact. By some estimates, the United States produced approximately 50% of the world's manufacturing output. No other nation had such economic power or industrial capacity. But this dominance wouldn't last. In 1944, with the end of the war just over the horizon, the Allies met at Bretton Woods to plan the post-war economic order. They agreed to make the US dollar the global reserve currency, pegged to gold. This meant that other nations would need to hold American dollars in their central banks in order to trade internationally and stabilize their economies. Alongside this, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank were created to help manage global finance and Reconstruction. The goal was to foster economic ties, reducing the likelihood of future wars, while also giving the U.S. a tool to influence global economic and political order. Yet this new global order would eventually lead to greater challenges for America's middle class. From 1948 to 1952, the Marshall Plan invested roughly $12 billion to rebuild Europe. That would be about $150 billion today. At the same time, the U.S. supported Reconstruction in Asia, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, with roughly $5 to $6 billion, or around $60 to $7 billion in today's money. These programs had a clear Cold War strategy: strengthen allied nations and counter Soviet influence. But they would also have significant downsides for middle-class America. Because the US dollar had become the global reserve currency, other nations built strong, export-oriented economies to earn dollars. At the same time, the dollar's reserve status made it easier for the US to run trade deficits, importing more goods than it exported. As a result, cheaper Japanese cars and German electronics began to flood the US markets, undercutting local factories and outsourcing well-paid manufacturing jobs. These economic pressures were compounded in the early 1970s by economic shocks that further strained American households and factories. In 1971, President Nixon removed America from the gold standard. The floating exchange rates which resulted from this action caused U.S. goods to be even more expensive abroad, hurting exporters and factory workers. 2 years later, another blow struck. The OPEC oil embargo of 1973 sent global energy prices soaring. Higher fuel costs increased expenses for households and industries alike, driving inflation and slowing economic growth across the country. Together, these developments reshaped the U.S. economy, contributing to the gradual decline of domestic manufacturing and increasing pressure on the middle class. But economic shocks were only part of the story. At first, globalization lowered prices and the technology and finance sectors grew rapidly. But it came at a stiff cost to the middle class. Union jobs disappeared, wages stagnated, and families increasingly needed two incomes to maintain stability. Picture a factory worker in Ohio, clocking in every day for the same paycheck they earned 10 years ago. Their rent, though, has climbed 30% since 2015, straining their budget. If they want to buy a home in 2025, instead of renting, the average home price is $410,000, which is about 5.5 times the median household income of $75,000. This is compared to a more favorable 3 times in the past. It's more expensive to send their kids to college, too, as costs have surged. 200% higher than in 1980, then that's even after adjusting for inflation. And to keep up, their family's debt has nearly doubled, from 45% of income in 1980 to 80% of income by 2020. But it isn't just money. Cultural changes have added to the strain. Social and cultural changes influence middle-class stability. After the Second World War, philosopher Karl Popper championed what he called open societies in an attempt to avoid the things that he felt led nations and peoples to war. Popper's push for openness challenged rigid social structures, questioning traditional authority and loosening the bonds of community institutions like churches, local clubs, and civic groups. As a result, many middle-class families felt less anchored, adrift in a society where familiar connections were fraying. Other factors also put pressure on middle-class wages and opportunities. Demographic shifts like increased immigration and greater female participation in the workforce played a role. Financial pressures and cultural shifts combined to build a perfect storm for the middle class, eroding feelings of economic stability and community support. Which brings us to the present. Middle class pressures include real wages that have been stagnant for decades, home ownership and financial security feel out of reach, and debt levels that are increasing, leaving families vulnerable. The American dream has become harder to reach. Even with hard work, many families struggle to save, buy a home, or plan for retirement. And the roots of this struggle run deeper than just personal effort. Much of the pressure is structural. Economic policies often favor global trade, foreign manufacturing, and corporate profits over domestic job creation. Investments in education and training have not always aligned with real-world jobs. Many graduates face debt without stable employment. Globalization shifted production and wealth away from American communities, eroding traditional manufacturing jobs that once anchored the middle class. Some propose tariffs to protect local jobs or retraining programs for displaced workers, but solutions remain divisive. The result? A middle class squeezed economically, socially, and culturally, navigating a system shaped more by global markets than domestic needs. What will it take to rebuild the American dream? I'm Matt from Matt's Maunderings. Do you have a curious mind? Do you love learning new things like I do? Well, if you do, subscribe to Matt's Maunderings and let's explore together.